Which is what if Naruto became the Alpha Jinchūriki and claimed Hinata and Hanabi as his fox-bound queens? Part 3. And if you enjoy this fanfic, then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. Lee was sitting under a tree, in deep thoughts. What Naruto had told him was running in his head, again and again, making him wonder who was right on this matter. Was Naruto right? Was Sakura really shallow? Would she never see past his training sweet and odd haircut? Was Guy-sensei right? Would hard training and a show of strength be enough to win her over? Now that he thought about it more, he realized that a woman that would only want him for his strength would leave him as soon as he was defeated, and that was not something he wanted. But then, what to do? As he pondered this question, he looked distractedly at his teammates. Tenten and Neji were talking under another tree, giving him the space he needed. Guy-sensei had left to see if Kakashi-sensei and his team were nearby. Suddenly, two girls appeared in the branches of the tree Neji and Tenten were under. They were upside down, their long hair falling to Neji's mid-back, right behind Neji and clearly in view of Tenten, who was looking at them with shock and surprise. It was understandable, after all the girls had fox ears and tails, and what looked deviously like Byakugan. And massive grins on their faces. Tenten, are you listening to me? Asked Neji, a bit annoyed. Tenten pointed behind him, and he turned to see two widely smiling teens. Nii-san. With a yelp, Nei jumped back and landed on his backside, causing Tenten and the girls to erupt in laughter. It was only now that he noticed the Kumo headbands. The girls fell from their tree, twisting nimbly to land on their feet, and going over the downed and dazed Hyuga, giggling up a storm. It was then that Naruto landed, chuckling mirthfully. I never thought the almighty Washi would fall for something like that. He teased while the twins helped Neji to his feet. Said boy was too busy looking at them in shock to answer the taunt. Hinata-sama, Hanabi-sama, cut the sama already, will ya? Said Hanabi with a smile. We're cousin, so let's act like kin. Hinata smiled softly. It is a pleasure to finally meet you, Neji Nii-san. Naruto-kun talked about you a lot. The rest of the teams landed then, and Guy immediately began bellowing something about youth, freaking the two young girls out. Nii-san, please tell me you're not sprouting the same nonsense. Begged Hanabi. Neji looked at her with a slightly offended expression. And what makes you think I would? Do I wear a green jumpsuit? Or orange leg warmers? Both sisters wiped their brows in relief, especially after Yugito tied and gagged Guy. Kakashi looked upon the gagged Jonin with amused interest. Yugito-san, isn't that an act of aggression? No bodily harm was done, and I have diplomatic immunity. And besides, if the Hokage really wants to cause an incident about me gagging this guy, then change leadership, and fast, because no sane human can want to hear that guy. Kami-sama, I swear he is as annoying as B. Kakashi chuckled. Guy, you may want to be a bit less, youthful. I believe Yugito-san has a deep love for her ears. Damn right. Guy, still bound and gagged, nodded enthusiastically, not deterred by his current predicament, and was subsequently untied. They then set out to Konoha. Neji was quite happy to see that his cousins were asking quite a lot of questions about the Hyuga and Konoha, mainly about the living conditions and how their family was doing. It pleased him that Kumo failed to brainwash them, even though they did end up with appendages they didn't have before. When he inquired about them, they quieted down, and Hinata promised to explain everything in a more private area. Lee looked at them, at the way both sisters looked at Naruto, how he shamelessly answered both of them with smiles. He was confused. Why did he act that way? Did he not know of the affection in their gaze? Did he not know he'd have to choose which of the twins he'd date eventually? Or did he want to break their hearts? Lee frowned. A part of him, his wounded pride, wanted to believe it was that, but the reasonable part of him told him to watch. He was rewarded when Neji cautiously brought the point up, only to be surprised as both twins attached themselves to a very happy-looking Naruto, who slipped his arms around their waist. What do you mean, you can share? Asked an indignant Neji. Sometimes we have trouble finding out where we end and where our sister begins. Why would sharing a man be so bad? Asked Hinata. It is not proper. Do you really think we care? Deadpanned Hanabi. If it can help you see things our way, ask yourself this, Nii-san. Who would marry us and make us happy if not Naruto-kun? Would the fox features not cause us trouble in Konoha? I am sure the Inuzuka wouldn't mind. They are associated with dogs, not foxes. It would cause trouble. Calmly stated Hinata, and that's not mentioning the fact their dogs would be at our throat from day one. Added Hanabi. Besides, we are ninja, and killing people isn't really proper either. Said a softly smiling Hinata. So why should we not both date him? Girls, said Yugito with a soft frown. That kind of situation is supposed to stay in this kind of book. She said, holding her orange book up. Hanabi smiled slyly. If there had never been any threesomes, do you think they'd write books about it? Yugito stared at her student for a moment, and then conceded. Good point. Just make sure you're protected. What? Screamed an indignant Neji. You cannot be actually inciting your students to indulge in this kind of activities yet. No, but if they chose to, there's nothing I can do to stop them. I learned that soon enough. I'm just making sure they won't end up pregnant. That would cause me a world of problems. And with that, Yugito returned to her book, just in time to let a perverted giggle escape at the same time as Kakashi. The two adults looked at each other, smiled a bit, and returned to their books. Neji hung his head in defeat while Tenten giggled quietly. Lee was still lost. I don't understand, said Lee. How can you act like it's nothing? It isn't normal. Normally there's only a man and a woman in a relationship. That's just the most common type of relationship, answered Naruto. Why would it be so bad if we love each other? Lee thought about it for a moment. So, while it isn't normal per se, it is still youthful because there are feelings. Hinata and Hanabi looked at him with wide eyes, then to Guy, and then screamed, pointing fearfully at Guy and clinging to Naruto. It procreated. Guy looked at them and flashed a very bright and pinging smile. As much as I would like it, Lee isn't my son in blood, but he is in mind and soul. Lee smiled at this, happy that at least his teacher still acknowledged him. The last few weeks had been difficult, and there had been some tension with his teammate. Visibly, his choice to pursue Sakura had created a small rift in the team. Not long after, the group divided into small groups. Neji was catching up with his cousins. Naruto and Tenten were engaged in an apparently quite advanced discussion on Fuinjutsu. Yugito and Kakashi were talking about which issues of the Ika Ika series they preferred. Sasuke and Atsui were engaged in a discussion on swords and kenjutsu. He was at the back with Guy and Sakura, since they weren't engaged in any discussion. Suddenly, the pink kid approached him. Lee-san, I wish to apologize for my behavior earlier in the mission. Lee took a moment to let it sink, then nodded. Apologies accepted. Thanks. On a side note, I would appreciate it if you didn't ask me out for the time being. I just got a massive wake-up call, and for now I don't have the time or maturity for love. What do you mean? Asked Guy, curious. I just got out of a massive fangirl period, and I still have a few relapses from time to time. I'd rather wait till I'm completely out of this and established as a competent kunoichi before I begin looking for love. I see, nodded Guy, though I am not sure it is really necessary to wait that long. Look at Hinata-san and Hanabi-san, they are mature enough, I am sure you will catch up fast. No, I don't think so, answered Sakura. They've lived hell. Like Naruto, they were forced to mature quickly. They may look and sometimes act like teenagers, but deep down they're hardened warriors, far more mature than any of us, even Sasuke. To catch up to them fast enough, I'd have to go through some things I don't really crave to experience. So I'll wait. Guy nodded and remained silent. Lee took a moment to completely process what was said, then gave Sakura a tentative smile. May I at least hope for a friendship? Sakura smiled. Yeah, just don't try to make me wear that spandex. The teams reached Konoha fairly quickly, and went to report to the Hokage. The two Konoha teams had to leave their reports and it was polite for the Kumo team to come and see the Hokage. Needless to say, he was quite busy lately with all the foreign teams coming to visit him, so much that he had to cut on his training time. Thankfully, when the civilians had tried to increase the amount of paperwork he had to do to subtly gain more power, he had sent them packing. No, he did not need to sign personally the authorization for opening any new restaurant, thank you very much. Strangely, even when they were at their nicest, Ibiki and Anko weren't all that appreciated by the civilian counselors. Strange, he had heard that Anko had been very cheerful and enthusiastic. Maybe they didn't like the wallpaper. With a smirk, Hiruzen Sarutobi looked at his satisfyingly empty desk. It felt good to be a ruthless military dictator sometimes. The secretary then signaled that teams Kakashi and Guy were there with the Kumo team, exactly on time according to the schedule they had sent 2 days prior, though his secretary's voice sounded a bit stressed. Sanzo was a calm and professional man. He could even go through some of Naruto's pranks without flinching. If there was something that affected him it had to be big, meaning that Kakashi's message was all true. He gave the okay to send the 3 teams in, and waited to see what caused the trouble. First came in Team Guy, as energetic as ever, with a widely smiling Lee and a boisterous Guy, that was normal. What followed, was not. A woman with blonde hair gathered in a ponytail and wearing a Kumo headband suddenly appeared behind them and gagged them before pulling a familiar orange book out of nowhere. Then came Kakashi. Ma, you're getting better Yugito-chan, said the Jonin with an eye smile. You did it in only 2 seconds this time. Training makes perfection, said Yugito with a smile. Hiruzen's sweat dropped, even though the sudden silence was welcome. Then the brunt of the genin came in. First were Sasuke and a blonde Kumo genin, then Sakura, then Neji and Tenten, and lastly, something that would have made Jiraiya swell in pride. For before Sarutobi's very eyes was his student's godson, a fox girl with Hyuga eyes attached to each arm. Hiruzen's face remained impassive for a few seconds. Then he face planted. When he finally raised his face off the desk, he gave a serious stare to Yugito, causing the young woman to gulp and put away her book. As a mocking Konoha, asked the sandame, a hidden threat behind his words. Not at all, sir, answered Yugito respectfully. He actually hopes that these two will become Chunin so that he may assign them to diplomatic duties. Yep, and even if we don't get to Chunin, he's gonna assign us diplomatic duty, may he like it or not. Said Hanabi, a malevolent smile on her face. That, of course, caused Hiruzen to raise an eyebrow. Do I want to know? Asked the Hokage. Hinata smiled softly and innocently. Let us say that some of our pranks may have caused a little bit of trouble. That statement is one of the biggest understatements of the century, you realize that, right? Deadpanned Yugito, only receiving a smile from Hinata. Sarutobi looked at Naruto. Explain. Foxy got some of his chakra stolen by two dimwits some time ago. Kumo played with it after capturing said dimwits, who murdered your sensei by the way, and injected it into these lovely ladies. I guess Hiashi didn't take it too well. No, he didn't, and these, unique, features may cause a lot of problem in the village. I say let them try. Said Hanabi. They attack, we rip them a new one. Sarutobi's only thought, when faced with this bold declaration was, Hiashi's gonna be pissed. But that is when Hinata intervened in the form of a light swat on her sister's arm. Sister, be respectful and do not threaten Konoha's people. This is our home. Alright, I apologize for my behavior Hokage-sama. Said Hanabi, letting go of Naruto's arm long enough to bow. Sarutobi rose an eyebrow and gave Hinata an amused smile. Don't fret, I don't hold it against you. Said the aged leader, some mirth in his voice. Just don't send too many people to the hospital. Very well Hokage-sama, said Hinata with yet another bow. The aged leader relaxed in his chair and looked at the Kumo team. Well, I welcome you into Konoha, and wish you luck in these exams. Hotel rooms will be at your disposal, even though I think that two of you will more probably spend some time with one of our clans. Is there anything you would want to know? Yugito raised her hand. When is your student's next book coming out? Immediately, Kakashi perked up, a few stars in his eye. Everyone looked at them for a moment, then Hanabi pointed at Yugito. Ero Neko. Several people snorted at that, and Sakura absent-mindedly noted that it did explain the catnip beer. Anything I can answer? Asked the Hokage. Hanabi raised her hand. Yes. Where are the hot springs and are there shared private baths? Sarutobi gave her a brochure from the hot springs, and noted a slightly naughty look sent Naruto's way. Anything else? Asked Sarutobi, only to be met with silence. Alright, you are free to go. Kakashi, take them to this hotel. Said Sarutobi, giving the Jonin a note. Kumo has already paid for their stay. Everyone bowed and exited Sarutobi's office. With a pleased sigh, the aged Kage looked out of the window, only to catch sight of a group of armored men and women, all in different colors. What are these samurai doing here? Hinata and Hanabi were following their cousin through the streets of Konoha. They had left Naruto when a group of samurai had asked to talk privately with him. None had missed the enraged look that flashed across Sasuke's face, but they could do nothing about it. Neji had been told of their situation privately during the trip, with Naruto's secret being revealed too. He had taken it exceptionally well, only taking it as information and a mark of trust. The sisters were quite surprised by the very minute amount of glares they got. It was mostly curious stares, interrogative glances, and even the occasional attempt to hit on them, all met with a firm but polite refusal of course. They quickly reached the gates of the Hyuga district and strolled its streets, following their cousin. Many Hyuga looked at them with shock and confusion, some with an anger not directed at them, a few with disgust, but those were met with the sisters' fiery glares. In no time, they were in front of the head family house. Neji told them to wait on the front while he went to get the rest of their family, and the sisters complied. Hanabi looked at the courtyard with a critical gaze. It really needed a good bunch of flowers to liven it up. Then, she felt a small tug on her sleeve and met the silvery eyes of a 7-year-old girl. Eyes that held a hint of worry, and a good deal of caution. Excuse me, but I'd like to know why you have Byakugan eyes. Hanabi smiled. Because we were born with them, that's why. The little girl's eyes widened, and hope exploded in her eyes as she looked from one to the other. Hinata looked at her carefully, and gasped quietly, before coming to kneel in front of the girl. Would you happen to be Hikari-chan? She asked with hope. Hikari nodded eagerly, not sure she could trust her voice. Suddenly, she was enveloped in a hug, her face buried in Hinata's shoulder. I'm so happy to finally see you, Imo-udo, murmured Hinata, caressing Hikari's hair, before Hanabi joined the hug. Neji quickly paced the corridors of the clan head mansion, reaching Hiyashi's office in under a minute, and knocked on the door. Once his uncle invited him inside, Neji quickly entered the room and closed the door. He noticed his aunt sitting in front of her husband, pouring tea, and found himself happy. It would make it all the easier, he wouldn't have to track her down. When they saw him, they both gained a look of anticipation. Neji, I was informed that our daughters are on the Kumo team you had to escort to Konoha. That is correct, uncle. I assume you were told of their changes. Yes, but that is not what matters to me, said Hiyashi. I need to know their position regarding the clan and Konoha. They want to return to both, answered Neji with a smile. Hitomi let out a shaky breath, relief flooding her. Neji, please, would you tell me the address of their hotel? I would love to talk to them, said the Hyuga matriarch while trying to stay composed. That will not be necessary, aunt, answered Neji with a smile. They are in the courtyard. When the Hyuga family arrived to the courtyard, they saw one of the elders, on his knees, clawing at his throat, with Hinata glaring at him. Byakugan activated full force, and Hikari sitting in Hanabi's lap. What is happening here? Asked Hiyashi. Immediately, Hikari shot to her feet and rushed to him. Father, Hiro-sama came and called Hinata-ne and Hanabi-ne monsters. And then Hinata-ne began glaring at him and he began shocking. Hiyashi approached his eldest, the first of the twins to have been born, and placed his hand on her head. Daughter, please stop. Hiro-san is of use to the clan despite his idiocy. Hinata relented and lifted her glare. She raised her eyes to meet those of her father, feeling nervous about what he'd think of them, but was met with a kind smile, an alien sight on Hyuga Hiyashi's face. Then, Hyuga Hitomi came and engulfed her daughter in a hug, Hanabi already in the embrace, and it didn't take long for Hikari to join the group hug. Hiyashi smiled at the sight, then looked at Hiro, his face turning impassive again. I would advise you to leave Hiro-san, before I decide to finish what my daughter started. The elder scrambled to his feet and left in a hurry. Hyuga Hiyashi did not make empty threats. The reunited family then went into the house to get to know each other better. Naruto walked at the head of a heavily armored group. Half a dozen samurai were walking behind him, all in armor suits of various colors, along with Tenten, Daijiro, Masahiro and Keiko. He noted that all the samurai and Keiko had a katana and a wakizashi at their belt, all in ornamented sheaths. He was walking towards his meeting point with Atsuo. Before leaving, he had asked the Jonin to find him an apartment that would be to his tastes, leaving a long-lasting clone behind just in case. When the clone had dispelled, he had learned that the perfect apartment had been found, but he still needed the keys. When he reached the park where he was to meet with his older friend, he saw him in full battle gear, a pack on his back. Quickly, the brown-haired Jonin tossed him the keys. Sorry kid, can't stay long, got a mission. Enjoy your new flat. With that, he disappeared in a whirlwind of leaves. With a shrug, Naruto led his group to his new apartment. It was big, a bit barren for now, but it would change when he got furniture. They all left their shoes near the door, in a small closet designed for this purpose, then walked into the living room. It was vast, with large sliding glass panels on one side, giving access to a balcony with view over the Hokage monument. On the right was the kitchen, separated from the living room by a counter, and Naruto noted that it was already fully equipped. Naruto led them to the left, through a corridor. As he passed the door, he recalled what he knew of the place from his clone. First on his left was the room that would be his office, on the right would be his scroll library, then the second door on the left would be his meditation room, just in front of the door to his room, and lastly at the end of the corridor was the meeting room he'd need to take care of his clan holdings. Opening the door, he noted with pleasure that a conference table had already been placed in the middle of the room. He sat at the head of the table and motioned for everyone to sit down. All right, first off, Daijiro, how did it go? How do you think it went, boss? We wiped the floor with those idiots. Secondary orders, fulfilled at 73%, though I don't know what you wanna do with them. Insurance policy, any special notes? Yup, we managed to take all the biggest harbors intact and a good chunk of the smaller ones too, and we also seized an impressive amount of loot, mostly tradable goods. We also found some old fortresses carved in the rock of the islands, but we didn't find any way to get to them. Naruto noted that one of the samurai smirked when she heard this, but pushed that to the back of his mind. All right, now, I think I know why you asked for Tenten to come with us, so go ahead. Daijiro turned to the young girl and gave a wide smile. Girl, that idea of yours was the most dangerous, insane and brazen idea I ever heard. I loved it immediately. If my boy didn't already have a girlfriend, I'd introduce you to him. That was pure genius. Tenten smiled and thanked the giant of a man. Then, Naruto turned to Keiko and Masahiro. Now, what did you want to talk about with your friends? Keiko rose to her feet and bowed. Naruto-sama, as you probably know, our clan is old, very much in fact. Yes, I read something about the Okami being one of the oldest clans still in existence. Yes, but what isn't known is just how old our clan is. You may have noticed that our clan symbol is quite unique. It is in fact a very old form of heraldry, a mon, something common in the times before the ninja took dominance over the world. You mean a few centuries ago? No, I am not talking about this period, but about the time before ninjutsu even existed, the golden age of the samurai. The Hentai Empire. Naruto's eyes widened in shock. What? But I thought it was legends. No, it was very much real. And these men and women are the leaders of clans that survived the fall of the Hentai Empire, like our clan did. Sorry but, what exactly is the Hentai Empire? Asked Tenten. Keiko turned to her and gave her a small smile. The Hentai Empire was a very old state, one older than the Rakuto Sennin by millennia. It was ruled by an emperor of divine blood, and served by a variety of clans, the major clans having been founded by a group of kami that had fallen from the sky. We do not know whether this is mythology or history, but they believed this. Along the major clans were several minor clans of lesser power, among which we stood. In this time, they fought an old threat, a land corrupt by the power of an evil kami. To rid themselves of this threat, their shugenja, the closest they had to chakra users, summoned a great beast from the spiritual plane, the Jubi, and while it eradicated the threat of the corrupt lands, it also destroyed the empire and rampaged across the lands. Then came a shugenja of exceptional power, one that is now known as the Rakuto Sennin, that defeated the beast. From there, the records are foggy at best, but we know that the Rakuto came from the lowest class of denizen in the empire, and for this brought down the caste system that ruled in this time. With the castes gone, the samurai held no superiority anymore, and their golden age ended. The great clans in particular had suffered during the fall of the empire, and the Rakuto saw them as a threat to peace, so he finished the Jubi's job. The minor clans were either beaten into submission or destroyed. None tried to negotiate with the Rakuto, not even ours, because all the samurai of this time thought they were of greater importance than him and thus should have sovereign over him. Talking to him as an equal was thus not even a possibility for them, and in the end the survivors had to either submit or go into hiding. Through the ages, the shinobi took more and more importance, chakra giving them an always bigger edge over the samurai, whose traditionalistic ways rejected chakra with fervor, to the point where samurai became more and more of a weak memory. In the last 5 centuries, the samurai changed their ways slowly, but it was already too late to change the fact that the world now belonged to the ninja, and the only 2 samurai enclaves left were Whirlpool and Iron. Now that Whirlpool rises again, our old allies and friends gather in search of a new master to serve, a new banner to protect. Naruto nodded slowly, taking in the information. If the Okami were among the minor clans of the empire, then it would make you a samurai clan, yet you are shinobi. Our methods were always close to those of ninja, we mainly operated in small units and discrete actions, we didn't have to try very hard to adapt to this new world, and our first act as a clan of ninja was to smuggle our allies away from the Rakuto's hateful gaze. But some of our past remains, we always favor the blade over ninjutsu, the way of the sword is engraved in our blood. Naruto nodded, then looked at the group of samurai. They were all different, but all had the same light in their eyes, hope and eagerness. If I give you a home, and a place for your arts to flourish, will you fight for me, my clan, and my lands? As one, they rose and slammed their fists over their hearts. Naruto nodded. Good, I want to know my subordinates and their specialty. First he looked on his left at a woman wearing a golden yellow and black suit of armor. She had her hair gathered in a high ponytail and steel in her gray eyes. I am Tsuruchi Meuko, champion of the Wasp clan, our specialty is archery. Next came a man in a dark blue and green suit of armor. He had kept his kabuto on, only showing his face, barred with a scar starting at the left of his forehead, snaking across his nose, over his lips and down his jaw. I am Heike Tetsuo, champion of the Boar clan. We are first-line fighters, especially effective to block charges and attacks with our Maichong. Next was a giant, towering at the same height as Daijiro, bearing dark gray armor, with stripes of black and white. I am Ichiro Fujimoto, champion of the Badger clan. We are front-line fighters too, we endure and then retaliate with crushing force. A slender man in white and red armor came next. His short black hair and pitch-black eyes gave him an intimidating aura, and his stance radiated of determination. I am Usagi Hanzo, champion of the Hare clan. We are most at ease in the thick of the fight, taking on multiple opponents. Next was a powerful man, arms as thick as a trunk, his dark gray kimono struggling to contain his muscled chest, yet he spoke in a soft and calm voice. I am Kaiu Kenshin, leader of the Kaiu family, all that remains of the Crab Major clan. We are craftsmen and architects, and our work knows no equal. A woman wearing sea green and gold armor straightened. Her hair was a strange shade of brown, almost red, and her eyes were a fierce shade of fiery orange. I am Yoritomo Courage, champion of the Mantis clan. We are sailors and fighters, and none could match us in the old days. This device Daijiro-san found was one of our old creations, and the fortresses in Susanoo's teeth are our ancient domain. Help us reclaim it, and we will forever be yours to command. Then, Keiko smiled. I am Okami Keiko, leader of the Wolf Clan. We are most effective when fighting in small numbers and for extended periods of time. All the samurai left their place to stand behind Keiko in a neat line. Uzumaki-sama, the remnants of the Hantai Empire offer you their loyalty, do you accept? The young lord rose from his seat. I accept, said Naruto solemnly. As one, they drew their katana, causing Masahiro to tense, then all got on one knee, their swords presented to Naruto on their open hands, and began talking, as one. On our ancestral blade, my clan and I pledge loyalty to Lord Uzumaki Naruto and his line, may they reign for 1,000 years. They rose to their feet and sheathed their swords, before bowing low. Keiko smiled to Naruto. Thank you my lord, we have hoped for many years to rebuild what we could of the old days, and thanks to you we now can. For the first time in over 600 years, all the surviving clans are gathered. I will make arrangements to have everyone brought to Whirlpool, or in the Mantis case, to Susanoo's teeth. Naruto nodded in agreement. Good. The Mantis clan will watch over Susanoo's teeth with the other clans settled there. I want the boar, wasp, Kaiju, hare and badger to join the Okami in Uzu. I want my capital well protected. All the samurai saluted. Then Keiko led them out of the room, followed by Masahiro and Daijiro, leaving Naruto and Tenten alone. The blonde's shoulders dropped, and a sigh escaped his lips. Something the matter? Asked Tenten. I'm worried. About what? Many things. Whirlpool is getting up faster than I thought. People, and water in particular, may see this as a threat, and we are not ready for an all-out assault from one of the Great Five. Should Kiri attack, I don't think we could hold out more than a few days at most. This influx of fighters will make our defenses stronger, but I don't know how many swords these clans can lend me, or how good they are. Yeah, I see what you mean, but have faith. You got the most badass sailor ever among your troops, along with some pretty awesome clans. The Reizatsu for instance, I heard they have the Kirin summoning contract, how badass is that? They can just summon one of the most powerful creatures of the spirit realm. But currently, they have no one powerful enough to wield this contract. I'm especially worried about the Chunin exams. Why, you're easily Chunin level, you have no reason to be worried. I'm not worried about the exams themselves, more about what may happen during these exams. Such as, I'm worried someone might attack Whirlpool while I'm busy in the exams, like water for instance. With everyone distracted by the exams, the time would be ideal to attack lands far from the command centers like Whirlpool, and it worries me. I'll have to up the security around my lands and keep all my troops on high alert, but it might tire them too much. Tenten remained silent for a moment. It would take around 3 days for a force of reasonably trained ninja to reach the coast, and about half a day to reach Whirlpool with your fleet. Maybe you should request the allocation of a group of Jonin to your lands for the duration of the exams. They could help your troops. Maybe, but there's also the moral element. My troops may see this as a lack of faith on my part, and that would prove disastrous in the long run. I'll have to manage with what I have. Sigh, I never thought that having power would cause that much stress. At least it shows you're a good leader, since you worry more about your people than about your comfort. Maybe. Sigh, now, I gotta unpack my things and organize it all. Need help? Sure, thanks. Sitting in his room, Sasuke pondered the new developments brought by this mission. He now understood a bit more of Naruto, not much but it was something, and he held begrudging respect for him. Not anyone could live with something like the QB sealed in them and let almost nothing appear. But it didn't mean he held any fondness for the blonde. He positively hated the Uzumaki, and while he respected him, he wanted nothing more than to bring him low. Attacking the Hyuga sisters was out of the question. It would cause an international incident with Kumo, and he would have absolutely no support from the hierarchy. The clans are the civilian population, especially if their sob story got out. Sasuke growled, irritated that he had no way to harm someone he loathed so much. He hadn't paid enough attention to the lessons regarding land management, concentrated that he was on revenge, and the results were here. Now he understood better why Naruto was reading books on lordship in the gauntlet. He had recently tried to cover this by reading a lot of books on the subject, but all he had determined so far was that his lands were too far away from his to be any form of threat over his trade, and the fact that he eventually would have to trade with Whirlpool if he wanted to export the Uchiha weapons in the eastern part of the nations. He had ancestral allies, like the Kurama, but he didn't have enough influence as a person to persuade them to cause trouble to the young lord. Hell, the only one that would take him somewhat seriously would be Kurama Murakumo, clan head of the Kurama clan, but the man was a no-nonsense kind of man, and he certainly wouldn't put his clan's wealth and influence in the balance just to satisfy Sasuke. Some would say that Sasuke was being petty, but he only aimed to protect the Uchiha interests, and the rise of the Uzumaki clan as a prominent power in the Fire Country posed a massive threat to the Uchiha influence and standing, one that had to be eliminated. Of course, he couldn't be direct and kill Naruto himself, that would be exceptionally stupid. No, he had to find a way to soil the Uzumaki name, one that wouldn't be forgivable. He couldn't use the Hyuga sisters' affection. They were all willing and ninja were a lot freer than civilians when it comes to that. Forgery and forced testimony were also to exclude. Naruto wouldn't take kindly to this kind of things, and if he reacted in politics like in a fight, then he would retaliate with overwhelming force and speed. On the battlefield, he was the blonde's equal, maybe even a bit better. In politics, not so much. The best course of action seemed to remain neutral, at least for now. A light tap against his window brought Sasuke out of his musing. There, on the windowsill was a little bird, the kind Danzo used when calling for meetings. If he was called, it had to be important. Getting up, Sasuke went to his dresser and took his mask and Anbu gear and put them on. Once dressed, he quickly dashed into the closest alleyway and let his body follow the usual way, his mind reviewing the various reasons Danzo might have called a meeting of this type for. In no time, he reached the underground facility and one of the guards told him in which room he was expected. Sasuke was surprised to hear that it was the biggest room of the facility, but made his way there nonetheless. As he reached the room, he noticed his teammate and the bun-haired girl talking lowly, with frowns on their faces. Naruto had his mask at his belt and his complete battle gear, staff included. Without a word, Sasuke followed them inside, and was momentarily stunned by the amount of shinobi present. It was a large amphitheater, one designed to house at least 300 people, and was mostly used by the staff of the Gauntlet for large reunions, but here it was filled with shinobi of all ranks, so many that there were even a few that had to stay standing due to a lack of seats. Looking around, Sasuke noticed that the shinobi were grouped by rank and was startled to see that there were barely 24 genin, all of them below 15 in age, and he recognized them all almost instantly by their posture. Going to the group of genin, he took his place amongst the ranks, standing at attention. Naruto looked dispassionately at his teammate, noticing amusedly the annoyed glare his fellow genin were sending his way. True, he had beaten them all, sometimes with so few efforts it was embarrassing, but was it a reason to ignore them? When Naruto had appeared unmasked, it had been a small surprise, but he had been overall welcomed warmly, mainly because he had gained his skills through hard work like most of them and not by sheer talent like Sasuke. Neji had already been there when they arrived and also had his mask at his belt. A few had come with the gauntlet-issued Anbu suit, but Sasuke was the only one to have kept his mask on among the small community of those that had been allowed to keep them, making him quite visible. And not in a good way. Murmurs were going around the room, many wondering why they had been asked to come, or why so many people were here. Tension suddenly increased when a host of Anbu entered the room and lined against the back wall. Some had the old root mask, but most of them wear regular Anbu, and by the looks of it the whole corp was there. Not a reassuring thing to notice. Then, both Danzo and the Hokage stepped onto the stage. Danzo opened his mouth to talk but stopped when he noticed Sasuke still wearing his mask. "Taka, remove your mask." Sasuke did so, revealing an impassive face, and Danzo nodded. "Students of the Gauntlet, Anbu, you have been called here to be informed of several important facts. First of, Naruto, come here." Naruto moved forward and jumped onto the stage. "I take it it's time to tell them," he said, patting his stomach, and Danzo nodded. Hiruzen gave him a sympathetic smile. "I am sorry Naruto-kun, but it has to be done." "No worry old man, I've gone through this training, I know how they're taught to think, they'll understand just fine. Besides, we're comrades," said Naruto calmly, earning grins and approving exclamations from the audience. He turned to face the amphitheater and looked at them calmly. "Now, what I am about to reveal should be a shock only for those of you that are low chunin or genin, since everyone above these ranks has already been informed. Remember the lessons at the academy about how the Yondaime killed Kyuubi? Well, that's good for a novel, but not exactly reality." Shizuka, the only female graduate of his class to have gone through the gauntlet, raised her hand. She had black hair, two bangs wrapped with some bandages framing her face, big green eyes, and a calm expression on her face. She wore on her petite frame a soft white jacket over a black shirt and pants the same color as her jacket. Two small fans were strapped to her belt. Naruto nodded. "Are we to understand that you have a link with Kyuubi?" Naruto nodded again. "As always, your mind is swift dove. Yes, I have a link with Kyuubi. Yondaime-sama sealed it inside of me. Because of this, I belong to a very small category of humans, the Jinchūriki, those that contain a biju." A moment of silence followed as those that didn't know processed the information. Then, Tenten rose her hand. "Yes Tenten, what type of seal did Yondaime-sama use? I mean, I get it was a containment seal, but far more complex than a storage scroll. I can already guess that, to keep the fox from taking over, there has to be a will suppressor part, a chakra suppressing piece, maybe even a converter to turn its chakra into something usable harmlessly, and honestly I can't wrap my head around a seal that complex. Well, you're right about the converter. That's part of why my reserves are so big. From what my commanders in Whirlpool told me, a standard Uzumaki my age only had half my reserves. Tenten gaped openly at him. What the hell is that clan of stamina freaks? You're on par with a low Jonin twice your age. This, of course, caused many shows of surprise to break out throughout the room, with more than one, what the fuck? Being either screamed or talked very loudly. Naruto only grinned cockily. Anyway, is there anyone here idiotic enough to think I'm the Kyuubi? Asked Naruto, returning to seriousness. Wait, you mean that's why people hate you? That's dumb, exclaimed Akito, the aptly named Kuma. He was bulkier than most children his age, had brown short hair and hazel eyes. He wore a dark green jacket opened on a black shirt, dark green camouflage pants and the classic shinobi sandals. Naruto knew his weapons, a pair of steel shells that enveloped his fists and, once his fire chakra was channeled in it, made quite deadly weapons. No Kuma, that's not why, I just bring up bad memories. Everyone seems to understand, may I return to the ranks? Sarutobi nodded, and Naruto left the stage after bowing. Now, said the old cage, as you can all guess, a Jinchūriki can easily become a particularly powerful shinobi if well trained. If we have asked for your presence here today, it is because no less than 2 foreign Jinchūriki will be present in Konoha during the exams. The room broke out into whispers, and Danzo frowned. He knew about the Suna brat, but what other village had sent a container? Our allies of Suna have sent the container of the Ikibi, however this biju is known for making its host unstable and violent. A scream descended from the ceiling and exposed a picture of a red-haired kid with a cold expression and black circles around his eyes, the kanji for love tattooed above his left eye. This is Gaara of the desert, holder of the Ikibi. If you notice him around, avoid any conflict and tactfully take care of any conflict between him and a civilian. The good news is that he is antisocial, and thus avoids human contact as much as possible. The bad news is that he enjoys killing. For those of you who are genin, I invite you to carefully consider your options should your teacher offer you a place in the Chunin exams. The Hokage made a hand motion, and the screen flashed to a new picture. It showed a green-haired, orange-eyed girl wearing a sleeveless midriff white shirt with mesh armor underneath, fishnet shorts with a short white apron above, a red cylinder on her back. The girl, seen from the right, was looking above her shoulder, suspicion clear on her face, showing the Taki headband on her right arm, just above her white armlet. This is Fu of Taki, said Sarutobi, container of the Shichibi. While Taki's Fuinjutsu isn't as sloppy as Suna's, the only recorded use of a Jinchūriki by Taki forces was the destruction of the village hidden in copper, just north of their border. From what we know, the container snuck into the village before releasing the seal, killing himself and freeing the biju, with obvious results. Considering their previous use of the Shichibi, we must be cautious and be prepared for the worst. Watch out for any suspicious behavior, any attempts at isolation. If she begins to release the seal, kill her. If that is all, dismissed. Naruto's hand rose. Sir, what of the teams without members trained in the gauntlet? Surely a warning has been issued. It has, but the clans are pushing to see their heirs fight in these exams. At the risk of losing them. Politics, my boy, politics. The clans want to give a show of strength, something they haven't really been able to do lately, with the notable exception of the Hyuga. By sending their heirs in the fray, they hope to show that they are still a vital part of our military infrastructure. A matter of pride, great, mumbled Naruto. Not long after, the meeting was adjourned and the crowd left the amphitheater. Fu looked at the people in the street with a mix of suspicion and longing. When she was in Taki, she could never relax. The glares, insults, dark mutterings, it all made her paranoid. She always feared an attack, and sometimes wished for it, just so this excruciating wait could end. When she had finally stepped out of the village and into another with no knowledge of ninja business, it had been liberating. People finally treated her like a human being. She could joke, laugh, smile. But she didn't feel safe doing that here. Konoha was a ninja village, they would know what her burden entailed, and react accordingly. She hated it, she hated her life, and she hated the Hanabi even more. All she wanted was to be free and happy, but that would never be her life. She would forever be ostracized by the likes of them all. Idly, she wondered if someone in this village suffered the same fate as her, but quickly dismissed the idea, knowing the answer would bring her nothing. Not even comfort. Looking at the sun, she noted it was time to go back to the hotel. Her teammates would soon be there and she'd rather avoid them and their hostility, something she'd have to put up with if she returned later than them. However, when she looked around herself, she felt disheartened. She was lost in the unfamiliar streets. A sigh escaped her lips. Excuse me, Taki-san. Fu turned and looked at a teen around her age, with black hair. That was about all she could see of his features. His body was concealed beneath a large green cloak and his eyes were shielded by sunglasses. You seem lost, may I help you? Fu nodded, keeping her face impassive. She didn't know this boy, and like all strangers, she didn't trust him. Now, that never stopped her from being nice before, but he was a ninja and she preferred to remain guarded. Yes, thank you, could you please help me find my hotel? Here's the address, she said, handing him a piece of paper with the address of the hotel written on it. He nodded. I see. Please, follow me this way, he said, turning slightly and extending his arm in the direction she faced. Fu began to walk, and he followed suit, staying at her level. Am I correct in my assumption that you are here for the Chunin exams? Asked Shino calmly. You are correct, answered Fu dispassionately. She had no interest in a discussion with him. He would treat her like everyone else if he knew what she held. They walked in silence for a minute or so, then Fu's gaze was caught by a butterfly. It may seem strange, but despite having an oversized bug made of chakra in her guts, Fu had developed a liking to the insect world. It had started as simple curiosity before evolving into a passion. Seeing the beautiful insect flying immediately melted her defense, and she smiled affectionately at the little being. Her guide seemed to notice, took out a small drizzle and poured a tiny bit of a clear liquid in his hand. Immediately, the butterfly went to his hand landed on it, made its way to the minuscule puddle and apparently began eating. Fu looked at this in surprise and shot her guide a questioning look. It is a family recipe, it emulates flower nectar. It proves very useful when studying insects. Suddenly, her guide became interesting, someone to talk to about a common interest. You study insects? She asked, surprised and pleased. Yes, as does the rest of my family. Insects are very misunderstood creatures, they have their own beauty and strength. Fu felt her defenses slip, but she didn't care. She yearned for human contact and this discussion was a perfect mean to get it. She smiled warmly at the boy, whose high collar hid a light blush. I happen to have an interest in insects too. Say, the fire beetles have their mating season around this time of year, yeah. Yes, it begins next week's. A beautiful display indeed, one I am sure you will appreciate. Fu grinned happily. She had seen a few pictures of it, and now she'd see the real stuff. That was something she looked forward to. I heard there's a festival held in that period, is it also true? It is. The shining abdomen of the fire beetle is often compared to fire, and as such their mating period seemed like a perfect allegory of the will of fire and the villagers that hold it. I strongly recommend that you attend the festival, it is quite enjoyable. Fu smiled at the prospect, she already wanted to be there. By the way, my name is Fu, it's a pleasure to meet you. She said with a smile, extending her hand. And my name is Aburame Shino. He said, grasping her hand and bending forward to leave a kiss on her knuckles, causing a fiery blush to spring to her cheeks. The pleasure is all mine. Now, allow me to escort you to your hotel, he said before offering her his arm. Fu grasped the offered limb and smiled softly, a blush dancing on her cheeks. They talked all the way to the hotel, mainly about insects, and Fu only let go of his arm in the hall of the hotel. Fu-san, may I come here tomorrow? There are a few places I would like to show you, if it is all right with you. Fu smiled brightly at the prospect of spending a full day in the company of the young gentleman. Oh, it would be with pleasure. Shall I prepare something for lunch? Please, do not, I will bring lunch myself, hopefully you will enjoy some of my family's traditional dishes. Oh, aren't you spoiling me, Shino-san? Asked Fu teasingly. Is it not a man's duty? Answered Shino with amusement in his voice. Fu giggled and blushed softly, she really liked that boy. Very well, I will wait for you, at what hour will you come? Is 9 a.m. all right? Absolutely, I look forward to spending tomorrow with you. As do I, said Shino. Until then, I wish you a good day. You too, answered Fu with a smile. She watched him leave, and once he had exited the hotel, went to her room with a spring in her steps. Shino felt oddly satisfied, perhaps because he had met a girl his age that shared his love of insects. His bugs had already told him of the particularity of her chakra, and comparing that knowledge to what he knew of Naruto, he had drawn the logical conclusion. But that certainly didn't stop him. As he walked through the streets of the Aburame compound, he mentally listed the places he'd like to show to Fu, both places with interesting insects and beautiful landscapes. Perhaps he was moving too fast, but it was still innocent and it wasn't officially a date. When he entered his house, he noted that the sandals of both of his parents were there before proceeding to the living room. Inside, he found his parents waiting for him, seated on the couch, smiling. Shino, please come and take a seat, said his father, patting the seat between them. Shino took off his coat and put it on the hanger before going to the couch and seating between his parents. Few suspected it, but the Aburame were a very warm family, if a bit quiet, and this warmth expressed itself through physical contact and intense support between clan members. "Yes, father," asked Shino once he was comfortably seated. "I have seen you in town with a young lady. Is there something I should be aware of?" asked Shibi with an amused smile. Shino blushed slightly but answered nonetheless. "Yes, that would be Fu-san. She seemed lost and I offered to guide her to her hotel. By offering your arm, on the way we had a discussion about insects. It so happens that it is also an interest of hers. After that I felt compelled to act as a gentleman," answered Shino, causing his parents to smile knowingly. "Though I will admit I enjoy her company. I offered her to spend tomorrow with me, and she accepted. I would like to have your help, mother. I wish to prepare a lunch for tomorrow." "Of course, son, I will help you," answered his mother with a smile. 4 teens sat at a table in a shinobi-only bar in one of the districts of Konoha. They were young, having left the academy a few months earlier. They were Moritaka Shizuka, the dove, Kurohana Toshi, the tiger, Hiromi Akito, the bear, and Tokigawa Tenzo, the mantis. Toshi was a brown-haired teen with sharp purple eyes, wearing a dark blue jacket and pants and dark purple shirt. His weapons were two-bladed gauntlets whose blades could spring out with a pulse of his chakra. Tenzo was a black-haired boy of average height with brown eyes. He wore a black skin-tight sleeveless shirt and black pants and fought using 2 kama. Finally, their drinks were served. Once the waiter had left, Shizuka began talking. "So, are your teams going to attend the Chunin exams?" "Are you kidding me?" grunted Toshi. "Not only will there be 2 foreign Jinchūriki, it is guaranteed that Team 7 will participate. I'm not going up against the asshole or Kitsune-senpai, and certainly not at the same time. Team 2 won't be in these exams." "Same with Team 5, said Akito. "Way too dangerous. My teammates aren't ready for this. I've done my best, but they're not Chunin material yet, and certainly not ready to face this kind of competition." "I agree," said Shizuka. "I've convinced my teammates to stay out of this for this time. It took some convincing, but in the end, I did it. Team 4 will stay out of it." "Same for Team 9, said Tenzo. "I thought the same thing. The situation isn't at our advantage. Jumping in there is suicide. I hope for the clan kids that their parents gave them special training, because if not they'll die." A few moments of silence ensued as they all sipped their drinks thoughtfully. "So, who do you think will make it to the finals?" asked Akito. "Team 7 is a given," answered Shizuka. "Shino-san will probably be able to pull Team 8 through the second phase. Given the composition of Team 10 I wouldn't bet on them, but Shikamaru is a wild card. It will depend on whether or not he can motivate himself." "And for the foreigners?" inquired Toshi. "I'd say the Suna team. All kids of the case cage with one of them being a container. They seem like a sure bet. Then, there's that Taki team with green head. We know too few on them but they may pull through. One thing is certain. The Kumo team will pass. I've seen the Hyuga twins. They look like innocent teens with a tail and 2 fox ears added, but their body language tells a different story. They're fighters, the dirty kind, and from what I've dig up, they are exceptional trackers. If, like I suspect, Training Ground 44 is picked as playground, they're gonna have a blast. Oh boy, right now I'm just so happy I decided to stay out of these exams," said Tenzo. "Anyone else you see passing?" No one I can think of right now. Though, if I had to guess, I'd say there might be a challenger in the team from Odo. After all they've been spying on us for around a minute with relatively good skills. By the way, why don't you get down here? It is quite rude to eavesdrop." 3 ninja jumped from the roof and landed in front of their table. First was a boy that looked like a hunchbacked mummy hidden under a massive straw cloak and with his headband on his forehead. Then was a girl with long black hair that wore a pale green flak jacket, her headband on her forehead. And lastly was another boy with spiky black hair held back by his headband. He wore a hakiri under the cloth of his headband, and had a beige shirt with the kanji for death written in red on the front 3 times. Interestingly, they all wore snake-patterned scarves and pants. "Ha, it took you that long to detect us. Che, Konoha's full of weaklings. Believe what you will. Now, may we know why you are still here?" answered Tenzo with an amiable smile. "After all, according to the death-obsessed guy, you despise us, so why bother with our oh so unworthy company?" he asked, adding mockery to his tone. "You little," said the spiky-haired one as he gathered chakra before stopping when he felt a finger pressed against his throat. Looking to the side, he saw Toshi, standing there. "First off, don't cause trouble in our village. Second, try using any jutsu in a crowded area and I'll remove your head. Third, use that brain of yours. Konoha is one of the 5 great villages. If we were weak, we wouldn't be on the top spot." "Got it, dumbass," he said, a smirk of derision on his face. The kid was without a doubt about to give a smartass retort, but the mummy interrupted him. "Quiet, you fool. He's one of those elite genin we were told about." "Oh, Elite genin, I like the sound of that, said Tenzo with a cheeky smile. Then his face became serious again. Now that you've realized that we can kick your all over the village, I do hope you'll prove a bit more respectful. He got a nervous nod from the leader. Good, now we wish you a good day and loads of fun. Then, he waved them away, not even looking at them anymore. Or so it seemed. As the sound genin left, Toshi returned to his seat. The four of them were keeping an eye on them, and once they were way out of earshot, they began talking. He was gathering chakra in his arms. Noted Toshi. Usually, the chakra for ninjutsu or genjutsu is gathered in the torso, yet he gathered it in his arms. What kind of technique do you think it is? I don't know, answered Shizuka, but I noticed that he was careful not to show the palm of his hand, maybe it's related. He shifted his footing slightly, as if he wanted to absorb an impact. A shockwave, perhaps. Maybe he has the ability to send shockwaves from his palms. Shizuka-chan, your ability to deduce someone's capability from the smallest details will always amaze me, said Tenzo, causing Shizuka to blush and smile lightly. Calm down, lovebirds, grunted Toshi. Mr. Mummy had some kind of big gauntlet on his right arm, one big piece of metal with holes in it, and there was a small sound of bells coming from the girl when she walked. Shizuka let out a predatory smile. Toshi, thank you for this intel, it will be most beneficial. Her answer was an amused grunt and a smirk from Toshi. Now, let's see, the gauntlet, it could be a mean for defense, but then why the holes? It would only serve to weaken the structure. Was there a cavity inside? Yeah, one big cavity inside the gauntlet, with metal even at the bottom. A cavity, how can a cavity be used for attack? Shizuka began to mutter to herself. How? Cavity, sound, music, she exclaimed, surprising those around her. That's it, he uses the cavity of his weapon to generate vibrations and increase the power of the sound, like with a guitar or a violin. If I had to guess, he somehow messes with the sound waves using chakra and uses them to wound his opponent. Toshi looked at Tenzo. Your girlfriend's scary. She's not my girlfriend, answered Tenzo, before adding under his breath. Yet, he did not notice Shizuka smiling slightly. And Missy? Asked Akito. Her pouch showed deformations that tend to happen when you carry a lot of senbon, and from what Toshi told us, she had small bells. She also doesn't look like she's a taijutsu fighter, her hands aren't calloused enough. I know I'm not really a censor, but I don't think her reserves are big enough to be a ninjutsu specialist either. I'd agree with you, Akito, said Shizuka. My guess is that she's either a genjutsu specialist or an expert in misdirection and distraction. Possibly both. A moment of silence followed. Sue, what are we gonna do with all that intel? Asked Akito innocently. The three others looked at each other and smiled. Why, give it to Senpai of course, that way he can get on the asshole's nerves some more. Answered Toshi with a smirk. Naruto was walking through the streets of the village. He had left his apartment a few minutes earlier after finally finishing rearranging his things. It was about time, it had taken him 2 full days. Now that he had a big enough flat, all the files on Whirlpool had been transferred to his place and locked in a file cabinet reinforced with seals, but still, the classification had taken some time, especially since Keiko had recently sent him a complete report on the state of his military and resources. While it was reassuring to know that the clans had nearly doubled the number of samurai in Whirlpool, he felt that Wave wasn't defended enough, and he was worried for his enclaves on Tide's coast. He found himself facing a dilemma. Either he left things as they were and he risked being overwhelmed in case of attack, either he recruited more troops and increased the likelihood of an attack. For now, he had ordered the fortification of his eastern shores and an increase in patrols on these flanks. He also had a little plan to ensure that Wave would be better protected. He would ask the Reizatsu if they'd mind offering tutoring in lightning manipulation to some Konoha-jonin a few weeks before the finals of the exams, that way there would be some more troops on his most vulnerable lands. He still had 2 weeks before the beginning of the exams, and he had already begun making preparations. First off, he had ordered the preparation of a room in his palace in Whirlpool. He would spend his month of training on his lands, away from prying eyes. Second, he had ordered the Kaiu to work on improving Whirlpool's fortifications, and so far it proved to be an excellent idea. He had received reports from the engineering corps in Whirlpool praising their abilities. Though, right now his thoughts were on another matter. He calmly made his way to the Hokage Tower where he had to meet with Masahiro. The old samurai had stayed in the leaf to discuss a certain matter with Naruto, and after hearing him out, the young blonde had decided to take his opinion into account and act on this subject. And for that, he would need to meet the Hokage. Masahiro wanted to escort him from his apartment to the tower, but Naruto had refused politely. He needed some time alone to organize his thoughts. The matter could prove disastrous if handled incorrectly, but it could also prove rewarding if he handled it with care. Finally, he came into view of the Hokage Tower, and saw Masahiro, standing proudly in his dark blue armor, gathering attention from the crowd. Seeing a samurai in full armor, even ceremonial, was rare these days, especially in a shinobi village. Naruto smiled amusedly. Calmly, he stepped up to Masahiro, and nodded to him. The old man answered with a bow, and they both stepped inside the building. They made their way up to the top of the tower, ignoring the startled looks sent their way. Finally, they reached the desk of the Hokage's secretary. Sanzo-san, said Naruto with a smile. I would like a meeting with Hokage-sama as soon as his convenience will allow. The man nodded and went to the door of the office, knocking and stepping in. Naruto was a bit surprised. He expected Sanzo to use the intercom. A rapid look to the machine told him it was broken. Looks like even ninja villages have this kind of trouble. Sanzo stepped out of the office. Hokage-sama is available right now, you may go in. Naruto bowed slightly, Masahiro a bit more deeply, and both stepped into the office. Sarutobi was seated behind his spotless and very much empty desk, as usual, and signaled for them to take a seat. Once they were both seated, the Hokage gave an amiable smile. Ah, Naruto-kun, how may I help you? Hokage-sama, said Naruto formally, I am here as the Lord of Whirlpool and de facto head of the Uzumaki clan. I wish to discuss the situation regarding the symbol of my fief on the back of the vests of Archunin and Jonin. What of it? Asked a slightly weary Sarutobi. I recently took a decision regarding my clan's crest. As you know, the symbol of the old Uzumaki clan was a blue whirlpool. To honor those fallen in the defense of Uzushio, I decided to instead make it red. However, it makes it very similar to the crest found on the back of many flak jacket. It would be quite regrettable if members of Konoha's ninja force felt I was trying to, force my sovereignty upon them. Hiruzen nodded. He understood quite well, but it could also be taken as an insult, a way for Naruto to get back at the village for his quite deplorable childhood, and it wouldn't be taken so well. However, said Naruto, I do not want to give the impression that the Uzumaki clan is disloyal to Konoha, and would even like to show once again the trust that my clan placed and still places in Konoha. For this, as a symbol of friendship for the leaf and its forces, I offer to replace the orange spiral my clan gave this village by either a green, or a brown one. Hiruzen nodded slowly, noting the slightly satisfied look on Masahiro's face. You know that the orange spiral was in reference to the will of fire, correct? Naruto nodded. What would the new colors represent? A tree has two big parts. The leaves and the wood. A shinobi is a bit of both. By their strength, they keep Konoha standing like the trunk of a tree, and like the leaves their work brings to the whole what it needs to survive. The will of fire is strong, but without shinobi to hold it in their hearts, it wouldn't be. Through these colors, I aim to honor the ninja of our village. Hiruzen nodded in approval. That would definitely pass well among the forces. Very well, our forces will be told of your choice. Is there anything else? No other official matters. Good. I am curious, my boy, how are you doing? Quite well, the team is progressing well. We've begun to train with Sakura. I'm honestly surprised at how much she progressed. I wasn't talking about your team, said Sarutobi. Yeah. Sigh, I'm worried. I'm afraid Kiri will see Whirlpool as a threat and attack. Why would they? We are recognized as the strongest village, and we have our allies in Suna. Starting a war with us would be most detrimental for them. Besides, you should be more worried about the water daimyo. He's the one that may give you trouble, but of an economical nature. I guess. Thanks, old man. I guess I'll go now. Gotta meet my team soon. Sarutobi nodded and smiled at the retreating boy, nodding amiably to the old samurai. Maybe he'd invite him to tea. He looked like someone he could relate to, and hopefully he could tell him how some of his old friends from Uzushio had perished. 1 week since she had met Shino, and Fu could say without a doubt that it was the best week of her life. She had little contact with her teammates. Shino was always taking her out to show her some new beautiful sight or interesting insect, offering her some of the delicious abarame traditional cooking. Now, she was in her room, twirling in front of her mirror, admiring her new yukata. She had bought it for the festival. It was mint green with orange butterflies on it. She loved it because it went well with her hair and eyes, and hopefully Shino would like it. Fu had tried. She had honestly tried to avoid falling for him, because they were from different villages, because Takiwao never let her go, because he was a clan heir, because he would abandon her if he knew what she was. But her heart was stubborn and thirsted for human warmth, so she could only pray for a miracle, knowing that it had little to no chance of happening. With a sigh, she pushed back the depressing thoughts, focusing on the evening to come and being beautiful for Shino. Satisfied with her state of dress, she took a little bottle out of her pack. She had called one of her summons earlier this day to bring it to her. It was gift from her summons, a bottle of pheromones. For a human nose it simply was a fruity and discreet smell, but its ability to appease insects would be invaluable to make the evening more enjoyable. Besides, she wondered how Shino would feel with his colony all flustered. With this mischievous thought, Fu placed a few drops of her perfume in the crook of her neck, and took a last look at herself. Just when she deemed herself presentable, she heard a knock on her door. "Yes, good evening miss, Aburame Shino-sama is waiting for you in the lobby," said the muffled voice of hotel employee through the door. Fu almost floated to the door, an excited smile on her face, and opened. She bowed slightly to the employee and thanked him before going to the lobby, where she saw Shino, dressed in a dark green kimono and, surprisingly, without his sunglasses, allowing her to see his brown eyes. Shino turned to her, and she was pleased to see a blush creep on his face. He did like what he saw. Lightly blushing herself, a tentative smile upon her lips, Fu came closer to him. Once she was next to him, she smiled brightly. "So," she said, spinning around and showing her yukata. "What do you think?" Shino took a moment to compose himself before smiling warmly. "That the fire beetles should be worried, you just might steal the spotlights. You look lovely." Fu blushed happily at the compliment and took his outstretched arm in her own. The night had fallen, the fire beetles were flying everywhere, little flickers of light flowing in the wind, dancing around each other, spinning energetically, circling around the passerbys. A beautiful sight indeed. As soon as Fu stepped in the street, the nearby beetles began closing in on her, spinning around her happily. Shino looked on in fascination as the, admittedly friendly, bugs proved extremely bold, some even landing on Fu and crawling on her shoulders and sleeves, buzzing happily. Fu looked around and saw that the bugs sometimes landed on people and that, far from chasing them away, they let them stay there as long as they wanted. Fu took a better look at one of the beetles. It was big, around the size of the thumb of an adult man, with a bright red shell, a brightly shining abdomen and long antennas. She took one on her finger and brought it to her face, looking at its head with curiosity. "Hey there little one," she murmured to the insect. "How's it going? Got the ladies?" she asked with a cheeky grin. The insect buzzed happily in answer, making Fu giggle. She looked at the little critter as it took flight and returned to the fray of parading bugs. A chuckle from her side made her look at a smiling Shino, and she couldn't help but match his smile. The evening was nice. They passed from stand to stand, eating some festival food, playing a few games, with Shino showing commendable accuracy, being able to nail every target, even at Chunin difficulty, in the throwing games. It won her quite a few prizes too. Her favorite was a large fire beetle plushie, nearly as big as her torso. As they were exiting yet another stand, they met a couple that Shino knew very well. "Good evening son, and you, lovely young lady, must be Fu-san," said a smiling man with a mustache and the same haircut as Shino. He wore a kimono of a lighter green. At his side was a woman with long brown hair, a few fire beetles having landed in it and looking more like jewels than insects, a gentle smile on her face, and wearing a kimono the same color as her husband's. Or at least, she supposed they were husband and wife since the woman was holding the man's arm. Shino bowed his head. "Father, mother, it is a pleasure to see you this evening. Fu-chan, meet my parents." Fu bowed respectfully. "It is an honor to meet you." "Do not be so formal," said the woman. "It is our pleasure to meet you. Shino-kun has been talking about you a lot," she said, mirth seeping in her voice. Fu blushed. She could see Shino blushing too from the corner of her eye, but it was a major boost to her feminine pride. Her body wasn't the most developed, so it meant she had attracted Shino with her personality. It was both a proof that she had chosen well and that she could be proud of herself. At least she wasn't some shallow fangirl. "Dear, you embarrassing them," chuckled the man. "We should leave them to enjoy their evening. I do hope you will pass by the compound during the exams Fu-san. You will be welcome here no matter the circumstances," he said, a smile on his lips. Though, it left Fu with the strange impression that, somehow, he knew, but it couldn't be, he had just said she'd be welcome in his house. Pushing that thought out of her mind, she smiled brightly. "Certainly sir, it would be with pleasure." The couple stayed with them for a few more minutes before going on their way. The festival was indeed very lively. Shino guided her to another stand, one that interpreted omens. He didn't believe in it but it was tradition he said. She suspected that the rational boy wanted more than anything to get a laugh out of the overly vague predictions that were often delivered in these stands, but chose a free stand because he wouldn't spend a penny on it. Indeed, there were several Aburame clan members chuckling quietly near every omen stand they came close to, except one, the one Shino was leading her to. They didn't have to wait too long before reaching an old-looking woman with a wide, almost toothless grin. "Ma, two young lovebirds, a warming sight for my old heart," she said joyously in her quavering voice. That's when Fu noticed two fire beetle engaging in certain activities, right on top of her head. "Hey, what do you two little perverts think you're doing?" she said indignantly, glaring as best she could at the top of her head and unknowingly getting the attention of everyone around. "Get down from there. My head's not for that. Hotel rooms are." The people around began laughing loudly, making Fu blush, but thankfully the two little critters seemed to be done as they flew off. The old woman was laughing heartily at this and seemed, for unknown reasons, quite happy. "Ah, come on you two, sit down. Ah, the last time I saw that, the girl married the boy after a few years. It happens rarely, the beetles must love you to be so comfortable with you." "Maybe too comfortable," grumbled a blushing Fu-chan. "While we Aburame do enjoy laughing at the expense of fortune-tellers, there is a reason why none of my clan members are mocking Sukun-san. Her predictions have proved surprisingly accurate." Fu looked at Shino, raising an eyebrow, but the old woman was quick to defend her trade. "Would it be so hard to believe? You ninja have clans that can see through walls, get bigger, possess others or fight with insects. Is it so hard to believe you aren't the only one special?" she asked while laughing. "Well, might as well," said Fu with a shrug. "So, what do I do?" "Give me your hand, child," said the old woman with a smile. However, it disappeared as soon as took Fu's hand and her eyes glazed over, a sad expression coming to her face. "Such pain, your life has been a painful one indeed," she said, making Fu uneasy. "You were born under the vigil of the beetles, I see. The horned and the ravenous, both preside over your life." By now Fu was completely uncomfortable, a little scared even. "A hard choice will be made. Will you choose the kunai? Will you choose the cocoon? On the day where the voice of the stream cascades over the barrens, the choice will be made among burning sheets." What? asked an apprehensive Fu, looking at the old woman in shock, fear and confusion as she came out of her trance. I apologize. I do not understand those visions most of the time. Not until the events they predict have passed. I had a lot of those dark visions lately. I fear something sinister is coming, and you may play a role in it." Shino wordlessly offered his hand, his brow furrowed. The old woman took it, and her eyes glazed over again. "The spawn of the betrayed land stalks the ancient trees, and death walks in his wake. The rill sings over cataracts and forsaken, countless petals meet the earth. The great horn will prevail, what will the beetle do?" Her eyes returned to normal, but she seemed quite displeased. It never happened twice in a row. What is happening? "Oh, I am very sorry, I ruined your date. Please ignore the ramblings of an old woman, and don't let that get you too down." Fu looked worried, very worried, while Shino was indeed troubled. Were those predictions like to the exams and the odds he would fight in them?